Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
ArtPod is a South African-focused visual arts podcast hosted by Claude Chandler. Join me weekly every Saturday as I'm joined by a new guest who occupies a position within the visual arts community, ranging from fine arts, tattooing, framing, and logistics. Welcome to another episode of ArtPod. Today I'm joined by Alastair Kennedy. That's correct, right?
Yes.
I'm very good friends with Alastair. We had his brother on the first episode where I was still finding my feet, so hopefully now I'm a little bit better at what I do, or at this podcast game. So Alastair has worked at Zeitzmacher for over a year now?
No, more than 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah.
Time flies. And
yes, I was part of the original team that installed a lot of the work and then just carried on running the museum afterwards.
And so before we get into more of that, originally, well, you studied in Australia. You grew up in KwaZulu-Natal, went to high school there, and migrated to Australia. And there you studied theatre design, correct?
It was more of a general production degree, but
Okay.
I focused on set design and construction, kind of just out of my own interest, yeah.
And what do you think kind of fueled that interest?
I've always liked spatial aesthetics, and I found that because I'm from a fine art orientated family, I found that the kind of fusion of lighting and set and props was a really nice way to transition my knowledge of or just kind of my experience with painting and drawing specifically, so color and line and tone. So that's why I liked set design a lot and set building. But yeah, I've had a lot of different stuff since then.
Sure.
But it's still, I do think that what I did in my degree definitely has fueled a lot of my installation practice and my knowledge of art.
And saying coming from a fine art family or background, or being surrounded by those type of people, I guess, was it more of a motivation? I know for some people it might scare them off from that life or that lifestyle in terms of financial and even emotional hardships that can come with it.
I never saw myself as being I still don't see myself as being a professional artist. I do have some skill in drawing, but it's just for pleasure. And I would like to find more time of it, not to sell work or to have a financial career at all, just because it's something I enjoy. So in a way, yes, I've never really believed that I could be a successful artist, because I know it's very hard. But it was really nice finding something that I could still use my what I'm attracted to doing and make it applicable. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just the whole way you've kind of navigated to, say, Zeitz, and then now your new career, it's been quite interesting and I guess quite organic. From Australia, you finished your degree, and then straight after you moved to Cape Town, or you worked there for a bit, correct?
No, pretty much straight after 4 years in Australia, I came back to South Africa, and at the time, I wanted to work with Handspring Puppet Theatre,
Yes.
which is quite a famous South African puppet company that did a very famous production called of Warhorse. So I met Basil and he referred me to his ex-artistic director at the time, Johnny Young, who's a very successful puppeteer as well and director. And so I interned with her studio for a few months on a project called Firebird, which toured to the States. And that was like pretty much doing anything in the studio, from like stitching wet leather or skin that's about to become leather,
Nice.
to like bending like cane and stuff. To it was a good experience. It was tough but good.
And was there a desire for longevity in it? Did you want to grow in that kind of production theatre career, or did you just want to?
I did at the time, but the way I've always gone about things is I've seen what's available, and I've kind of made compromises between what's available in my immediate like vicinity, so like let's say a country, and what I like doing. So after that, there wasn't really any theatre work available for me, so I kind of went into the art world because in Australia I had done a lot of interning at museums and art galleries during my degree. So I learned a little bit about art handling and different types of ways to treat artworks, and to kind of what goes into assisting a museum or a larger art organization in preserving work, or the logistics behind getting an exhibition together. So I'd learned a little bit of that in Australia, and I found that since Cape Town has a lot of small galleries,
Yes.
has unusually a large amount of small galleries in my opinion, which is great. That was a more applicable skill for me to grow into than my theatre side.
Sure. Just because of the environment.
Just because of the environment, yeah. And because I've always liked doing different stuff. So I've never been afraid of trying to pursue something that I have some knowledge in, but I have a small understanding, not a large understanding of,
No, for sure. Well, I mean, getting to know you and knowing you, I feel, any situation you're thrown into, you kind of seem like you'll grasp it and just kind of grab it by the horns. I mean, in terms of small galleries, I remember my wife working at DF Contemporary, and then she got her first teaching gig.
Yes.
And then you basically took the reins over at DF Contemporary in Woodstock. That was an interesting chapter, no?
Yes, that was actually the first gallery job I had where I got a salary for it. But it was very different from what I was used to. It was like you doing everything yourself, but also like, it was very quiet, and I wanted to be more hands-on.
Yes.
Not that I minded talking to people and selling art, but I really loved installing exhibitions. So then I saw a job at Zeit like a year after DF, and it was for a preparator. They needed someone with that, so I decided to go for it, and rest is kind of history since now.
I guess, yeah. And I mean, in terms of that's quite a jump, and it's quite big league besides. I think there's this whole kind of prestige and aura around the museum, and I mean, it must have been exciting being a part of that, and being kind of in the center of the Cape Town art scene.
It was interesting because there was it was interesting seeing how a small team could put such a huge thing together, and also how having been working for Zeit for 2 years, having started before we opened until now, having seen how the Cape Town art scene has grown, not around it, but it's definitely had some impact on the way the world sees South Africa in terms of a country that can produce cutting-edge art, cutting-edge fine art. So it's it has been interesting because before Zeitz was there wasn't Norval Foundation, and there wasn't A4 Foundation, so Arts Foundation. So Zeitz happened, Norval happened, A4 Arts Foundation happened. So you have like three heavyweights, really. By heavyweights, I mean people who care about art, who sponsor foundations. So you need to have money to make something that big, and you need to have people who want to invest in art.
For sure.
Which is probably something you've touched on with other people before.
I think so, yeah. But I mean, definitely the best affirmation is putting money behind something.
Yes.
I think that's, that's when you kind of confirm your interest or its intrinsic value. Is there some conspiracy that all three popped up? It all seems very orchestrated. Or
it does seem that. I mean, I wouldn't know. Like, I was quite low level and very, very much in the physical maintenance and running of the galleries, the handling of the artwork, the condition reporting of the artwork, the installation of the work. I did everything from picking up heavy crates to painting work to managing the logistics of transporting something overseas. So I wasn't really privy to like the operations on a higher level than just the actual bones of the building. But I think it's unlikely that it was actually orchestrated. I think it was more like Zeitz showed people that there could be something like that in Cape Town or in South Africa, and therefore those type of people gravitated towards actually fulfilling what they wanted in the first place. That's just my opinion, though. I don't think I mean, a lot of the time the people who open museums or big places like this, I think, do know each other or may know each other. That doesn't mean that they are going, hey, I'm going to open a museum and, in like September, you should open yours the following year.
No, sure. No, totally. And in terms of, you were just touching on the small team aspect of it, I think chatting to you in the past about it, there's this kind of facade that there's, this huge, gigantic team to take on this mega force, but ultimately it's like a couple of Spartans.
Literally just a small team, yeah. It's hectic. It's that's the arts for you, though.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it's almost kind of been baptized in fire or hit the floor running. In terms of the skills you've learned, I'm sure it's
been immense. It's hard when, I'm of the opinion that you only really realize what your growth has been like when you look at things in hindsight, because to me skills development is such a subtle progression, but when I do look over the last few years, the amount of things that we've achieved as a team with just like three of us installing work. It wasn't always just three of us. We had help of really skilled freelancers a lot of the time. I can't just, it's disrespectful for me not to mention that. But we got help when we needed it. So when we needed help, it was like we were overwhelmed with the amount of work to do. So the amount that I've learned from having to jump in and do a lot of stuff is incredible. And I've never realized the amount of construction skills that I would learn from working in a big building. Because in a small gallery, it's not very necessary to know how to put up drywall or how to paint even a wall well, to use a very simple example. But that was one of the primary skills, was painting a wall really well, really quickly. How do you do that without damaging the floors, the ceilings, and making the space look basically like an amateur has done it? How do you make it look professional? So
Sure.
How do you be professional, essentially? And then how do you hang work on your wall that you just painted without damaging the wall too much? Because then that's extra work for you. So there's lots of little subtle things that I picked up. But we had a really good team. Like, I came with more art experience and the other guys who worked with me came with more construction experience, and we taught each other a lot.
Okay.
And then we had a really great manager when we started, who now runs Norval. And he was so experienced on multiple levels of really he's basically a savant of the art production world and curatorship, I think. So.
And I mean, from all these skills, you also work freelance now on the side, I guess.
I think you have to.
And so basically all those skills you just use in the private sector, or anyone wanting...
anyone who needs something installed or
We can do a quick plug. If anyone interested in Alastair's services, how may they contact you?
Well, if you need any art hung or anything really installed, you can contact me at my email address, alastairke@gmail.com. But I'll put more information up on your podcast website.
And then touching on Norval and the manager moving there, is there, I won't say cutthroat, but is it quite competitive about people snatching certain skills or certain people, certain labor, and it's...
It can be. I think because it's the art world and the community is quite small, you don't want to tread on toes.
Yes.
So... let's say if someone like myself wanted to move to Norval or something, they probably wouldn't hire me purely because they wouldn't want to ruin a relationship with Zeitz.
Sure.
But it does depend. Again, these things are so variable. They depend on the type of people you're dealing with, whether they care or not, what their relationship is with the people who run the museum that you currently work for. Generally, though, it's there is a kind of unspoken etiquette in the art world. But at the end of the day, it is business.
Sure.
In a lot of ways. So that's also what's confusing. It's not cut and dried.
Yes, I think for these kind of art institutes or galleries or establishments, for them, in order for them to run, I think there has to be a kind of a professional business aspect to it.
Yes.
And has to be seen as a profitable venture. I think anything too romanticized, it kind of blurs the lines, and I think that's when you get in trouble, because ultimately you've got staff to pay, those staff have families. I mean, there should be a bottom line. Yeah,
things should be incentivized for people to work there.
Totally.
Because then you get better mileage out of employees, people trust you more, people feel like they belong more. So financial incentivization is the easiest way to do that, in my opinion. And because it's finances, it's something everyone understands.
Sure. It's very black and white.
Whereas curatorship and fine art, the fine art world is not something everyone understands. A lot of people go into the museum, which is quite nice to see. A lot of people who don't come from a fine art background. We actually get a lot of people from South Africa coming in and going, is that art? What is that? Oh, I can do that.
Yes.
They don't understand the concepts behind something or the artist's reason for making something in a particular way. They don't understand a lot of the time the difference between pure draftsmanship and draftsmanship plus concept, or just concept, or just work based on concept, sorry, I should say. Each have their own values. So that's also the other thing is when you're working in the art world, you are working with a lot of people who don't come from a business point of view, who have to almost do a second education when they get into the professional working sphere of understanding how people and organizations operate with a mandate of how does this benefit me and my business model in some way. So it's like Zeitz is a non-profit organization. Everything we make goes back into maintaining the building. It's a lot of money that is required. But the waterfront likes Zeitz being there because it's a big attraction for tourists. So that's why they give us a lot of sponsorship. That's why we have very low rent with them. that's why they let us use the building. So they're a business. Their primary goal is to get people into their space to enjoy themselves into whatever experience and whatever they want them to experience. And Zeitz does facilitate them in a certain way.
Oh, sure. I mean, in terms of brand power,
Yeah.
if you just compared it to a brand, it's a huge...
It's a huge pull.
Yeah.
It's a magnet, it is.
Totally. I mean, Waterfront can justify any rent, say to Woolies, 20% increase, and, that's that at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We were kind of chatting a bit about all the drama around Zeitz. We're not going to go into specifics, but just how Zeitz seems to be a fun target. And I think it's, again, because of that magnitude and that brand. And there was that recent article.
It's an easy target.
Easy target.
Yeah.
And there was the mention of Kentridge saving Zeitz.
Yeah.
And I like the point you made. Do you want to just elaborate on that?
Yeah, my point was that, do you remember the newspaper that wrote the article?
It could have been, it's either August Times.
It's quite a big one.
Yeah.
But look, it's like, it's a bit of a low, cheap shot in my opinion, because I think they just have Kentridge and Zeitz and Save, and that's like the title.
Sure, yeah.
And that really does
Clickbait.
make people read the article. But I actually think it's actually Koyo, the new director, who's come to kind of improve Zeitz, because she is really amazing. We've had a bit of a turbulent kind of 2 years. She's the third director we've had in 2 years, which is hectic. But I was incredibly impressed with her and her manner, and I think that she's used the Kentridge exhibition to make some much needed physical changes to the way people walk through the museum and experience the museum. So it's benefited the Kentridge exhibition a lot by opening the space up, but it's going to benefit future exhibitions. And although Kentridge is an amazing artist and his studio is huge, ultimately what happens to the building is the director's decision. So it's, in my opinion, it's kind of the heads of the actual organization who are saving themselves. But that said, I was at the opening for Kentridge last night, and Koyo made a really great statement, which is that there will always be a kind of before Kentridge and an after Kentridge chapter in Zeitz.
Okay.
Because it is such a momentous exhibition for us. I don't think there's any. There hasn't been an exhibition of his this size, and I don't think it's ever been this big. So, yeah.
No, it's an amazing undertaking, and again, it's just I think without the Zeitz or without the Norval, you wouldn't have this, Kentridge show happening at this magnitude. And I just think it speaks volumes in terms of the interest in art. And I mean, if I just look at how many young artists there are and how many upcoming artists and how many attempt to do it full time, I think 10, 20 years ago that was just never a thing. You would have they would have a teaching career, they'll be doing something else, and then fine arts on top of that.
Yeah.
And
which is not a bad way to do it.
it's not a bad way. And I think I've put my finger in so many jars just to kind of strengthen my position in the art world.
Yes,
and that's why I'm doing this podcast.
Yeah.
That's why I run Eastside Studios.
Yeah.
If we're talking about brand, I think there is a shift where artists are turning themselves into brands slightly.
Yes.
I mean, some more outrageously than others in terms of social media presence. But it is a fascinating time to be in Cape Town, and I guess in South Africa in general.
It's really fascinating. What I like about Zeitz is the education department is one of my favorite aspects. It's another tiny team, but they really are this powerhouse of kind of creating these amazing programs or short workshops for children from a lot of disadvantaged schools, actually. And the curriculum is often based on the artists currently on show. Because we're a contemporary art museum, we have a lot of young artists as well. So it's, to them, I'd like to think it's quite inspiring. And I think that they will only keep growing in their capacity and their reach with what they can actually do. If they get more people, then they can do more workshops. So
For sure.
So that's my favorite part about the museum is the children's exhibitions, because seeing what they come up with is like, okay, this makes it all worthwhile. This is good.
No, totally.
Think of the children.
Always think of the children.
Think of the children.
Their children are our future. No, totally. I mean, I think it also just credibility, and then also just getting government-backed things behind them. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, in terms of diversifying the audience, the artist, I think you have to start young. And yeah, you're also saying an interesting strategy they're going to be doing with the Kentridge show in terms of the education department and how they...
Well, yeah, it's I probably can't really talk about it because it's still. I was just talking in.
All right, it was off the record stuff.
Off the record. No, just in a. It's going to happen.
Yes.
But essentially, I was talking to the head of education department at Zeitz, and she was saying that they are probably going to create a whole curriculum based on the Kentridge exhibition, and I don't think that's ever been done before. So in terms of, like, you'd study Kentridge in high school, but I don't think there's ever been a series of workshops that can be based on the amount of work that is on show. There's a lot of work on show currently. There's probably more than 200. There's about 200 works of his on show in the museum, and little, I don't even know how many are on show at Norval.
Sure.
So, like, there's a lot of work in Cape Town for people to be inspired to create content on, and basically an education program, a strong education program on. And his work is really great because it spans a multitude of mediums and works with a lot of different people and collaborates a lot. So therefore, I think it's quite not easy, but it's quite fun to create a children's workshop on Kentridge's work in particular.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think we are keeping our podcast short format, so we could chat on, and we'll definitely have you back on again.
Cool.
But yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Actually, talking about the logistics stuff, one of my next guests will be Ashley with Artist Admin, and we were just talking about the practicality of having someone handle the logistics and business side, so artists can be free and create and not be encumbered by all that.
As I was saying, I've never needed to deal with them, but from what I've seen, I'm very impressed with their business model and also what the service they provide. I think that's much needed for a lot of artists. Even the fact that they give consultancy, they don't just, they won't, if you can't afford or don't do their hands-on stuff, they'll just help you through giving you some advice on where to approach.
Yeah, and advice can go a very long way.
A very long way, yeah. So they're very community-based, arts community-based group, yeah.
Great.
I look forward to listening to that one.
Cool. Thanks, Alastair, and all the best.
Yeah, thanks, Claude.
Cheers. ArtPod is a South African-focused visual arts podcast hosted by Claude Chandler and produced by the generous assistance of Blended Podcasts, brought to you by Blended Audio.